Hey everyone, Future Ben here. I forgot to mention at the start of this video, but I'm writing budget EDH articles for the Commander's Herald now. I'll have a link to the accompanying article in the video description below. Make sure to check that out after watching this video. Alright, see ya! Hey everyone, this is Ben with Bathroom Brews MTG, and today I'll be telling you about my top 5 budget Landfall cards. Landfall, for those of you who might be newer to Magic, is an ability that triggers whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. That means either playing it or having it enter from something like Rampant Growth. At the time of recording, all cards we'll be going over today are under $1. I didn't take into account how much play they're seeing, simply their price and how powerful I think the card is. Lists are always subjective, so let me know if you disagree with anything in the comment section below. Without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 is Scribnibblers. If you haven't heard of this card before, I won't be surprised. I only recently discovered it when doing research for a deck I was brewing, and honestly, I'm surprised this isn't seeing more play. This in combination with any landfall combo, such as Llanowar Scout, Simic Growth Chamber, and Retreat to Coralhelm, you can exile every opponent's library. This will also disrupt any top deck manipulation from cards like Brainstorm, Sensei's Dividing Top, or Vampiric Tutor, just to name a few. Or it'll act like a Mystic Forge, and let you remove the top card of the library if you don't need it. An interesting rules note you might not know is if you have more than one land entering the battlefield simultaneously, it'll trigger this card that number of times. So for example, if you have 5 lands enter the battlefield at the same time, you will get 5 untapped triggers on the stack, letting you tap it and then in response to each of those triggers, untapping it. The same thing will happen if you have cards that let you double landfall triggers, such as Ancient Green Warden or Yarok the Desecrated. I highly suggest you pick one of these little puppies up, well, rats in this case, and try it in your next landfall deck. Coming in at number 9 is Stoneseeder Hierophant. At first glance, this card reminds me of Arbor Elf, a 1-mana card that lets you untap a forest. But I like this a lot more and for good reason. First, it'll generate infinite mana with the combo mentioned above. And second, it's a great ramp piece when used with some of the 4-mana ramp spells, such as Explosive Vegetation. Just like in Scribnibblers, if you have more than one land enter the battlefield at the same time, all of those untapped triggers will go on the stack. So in theory, you can untap up to 3 lands, including the ones you fetched out, and suddenly, the 4-mana ramp spell is basically 1 mana. And it lets you untap target land, so you could even use it as a political tool to help another player out in removing a problematic permanent. Number 8 is Phylath World Sculptor. This is your budget Avenger of Zendikar. While it does only check the amount of basic lands you control, which, if you're playing a budget landfall deck, isn't really a drawback in my opinion, it does make a metric ton of tokens for you to use and abuse. Having the ability to go wide and tall with one card is great value. Playing this in conjunction with Avenger also gives you potential for an unstoppable army of plant tokens. If you do play this as your commander, I'd suggest running First Day of Class with it to give all of your plants haste and putting a +1/+1 counter on them when they enter the battlefield, or Champion of Lampolt to make all of your tokens unblockable. And of course, you have some great ways to abuse all these tokens entering the battlefield with Impact Tremors or Woody Roast Master to burn out the table. Number 7 is Roaring Earth. With commanders like Slowgark the Overslime, Obud Moldiah Ancestor, heck, even the Gitrog monster, you'll be playing enough lands to turn them into a threat all on their own. Especially with all the budget fetches we got from Streets of New Capenna, we also have Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and so on. This also works with Awaken the Woods, since it makes land creatures. So instead of a bunch of 1/1s, you can make them a bunch of 2/2s, or just one really big creature. Or Nishaya, Soul of the Wilds. This lets you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control. If you're playing any of the commanders mentioned above, give this a try, I know you won't be disappointed. Number 6 is Trove Warden. You know what card type is a permanent and has a mana value of 3 or less? Lands. And what do we want to do with lands in a landfall deck? We want to have them enter the battlefield. So not only can we exile lands from our graveyards with this card, but some of the most popular white staples. Esper Sentinel, Spirited Companion, Knight of the White Orchid, or Archaeomancer's Map. And those are just the cards in white. The biggest downside to this card is it has to die. So if someone uses Exile to remove it, or blinks it, you do lose those cards permanently. One easy way to circumvent this issue is running High Market, so you can sacrifice it at instant speed to prevent it from getting exiled. If you want to be really mean, you can combo this with Obliterate. You store a bunch of lands or other permanents underneath it, then cast Obliterate, wiping the entire board, including lands, and then getting everything you stored underneath this card back. Is it mean? Absolutely. But is it fun? For you it will be. Number 5 is Tunneling Geopede. I would like to point out that the creature deals damage, which means if you can give it Infect, all you need to do is to play 10 lands to knock out the entire table, or give it some lifelink and get 3 life for every land you play. How about enchant it with Curiosity, so you can draw 3 cards whenever you play a land. There's so many great ways to abuse the damage trigger on this card, and it should see more play than it currently does. All for a 3-mana creature. Just writing this makes me want to build a deck around it. Number 4 is Retreat to Hagra. This and Tunneling Geopede are close in my opinion. It's a win condition just like Geopede, but it's an enchantment which tends to be harder to remove. This also combos with Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood, or Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose to either deal more damage or to gain more life. Quick rules note, there is a difference between life loss and dealing damage. Number 3 is Valakut Exploration. You might be noticing a trend in the top 5. This essentially becomes card advantage in red. Since you can play the cards, this will let you play any lands you happen to exile. Also, it doesn't put them into your graveyard until the end of the next turn. So if you have any instant speed ramp or ways to get landfall triggers on other players' turns, you can exile cards ahead of time, essentially drawing them. And it's a win condition, assuming you can get enough lands out all at once. Number 2 is Felidar Retreat. The reason I put this card at number 2 is for its versatility. If you don't need the tokens, you can start pumping your board, or if you don't really have any creatures, start making tokens. While 2/2s in Commander aren't the biggest bodies, this lets you grow them once you start to stabilize. And since it gives your creatures vigilance for a turn, it'll let you swing with a big buff board of baddies and beat up the rest of the table while not going shields down. And number 1 is Tatyova Benthic Druid. This shouldn't be much of a shocker really. There are 2 things you want to do in Magic: play lands and draw cards. Well, she lets you draw cards for playing lands, along with being in the best colors for a lands deck, blue and green. While it won't win you the game on its own, she will let you draw into your win conditions. And the fact she can be your commander is even more of a reason to put her at the top of the list. A lot of other landfall commanders push you in a direction, which isn't a bad thing, but if you're looking for a commander to just play all of your favorite Simic cards, you don't have a real reason not to play her as your commander. And with that, thanks for watching. Special shout out to my patrons shown on screen here. Of course, a special shout out to my friend Garrick Morgan for creating my intro music. Don't forget to hit that like button if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and leave a comment below if you think I got anything on this list wrong. As always, this has been Ben with Bathroom Brews MTG, and remember, always wash your hands.